Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This video has been a long time coming, and mashallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless my wife tremendously for doing the work of compiling the information and creating this very useful PDF or a document or PowerPoint, it looks like, actually. That contains basically all the information that somebody needs just at a very basic level to understand and navigate the complex issue of menstruation. This is obligatory knowledge for somebody to learn if they are a woman, or if some woman is relying on them, they have to provide that information for them. So this is necessary for everyone to learn, because if you're a man, then inshallah you're going to have a daughter and you're going to have to teach her. You're going to make sure your wife knows her rulings. Most women have no idea how to navigate these things. They're not taught these things. So it's about time we started fixing that. So inshallah this video will serve as an explanation to go along with the document that will be offered, inshallah. The document has more things than I will actually be covering, so I'll let you know which page that I'm on of it. The link is found in the description, so inshallah you can follow along. So actually it's from like I said, a document that my wife uses to teach, and before that she goes through her class. So you're going to see page 1 is just the title page. Page 2 is a warm-up. And it asks, for women to see which age they got their first period. Generally, if this is in a class setting, you're going to see that it really differs. And the days of your longest period, a lot of women don't know. Days of your average cycle, that's something a lot of women are very familiar with. And you're going to see that a lot of women, they really this is something that, subhanAllah, just hormones and stress and everything affects it. And these things fluctuate, so it's very important for a person to be in tune with those things and know. This is extremely essential knowledge. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. I know most people will be watching this as a recording later on. I'm encouraging you, stick with it and listen, pay attention. You have the document to go along. Make sure you learn these things. If it gets confusing, just slow down. I find that when I take my own notes, when I'm going through something that seems confusing, when I have to write it in my own words, then that forces me to understand it. Even if it goes one sentence at a time, eventually I end up understanding it. All right. So the other questions that are asked in the warm-up, now on page 3. How do you know when your period is completely over? How is one day calculated Islamically? And so on. Inshallah, we'll be covering all those things. Just for those who are wondering, when your period is completely over, there is like a white residue or dryness and so on. And if women become acquainted with that, of course, after they have many periods. Also, some women habitually stop, and then they think it stops for a few hours and then it starts again. And so everyone needs to know their body and how it works. And one day is Islamically calculated based off of Maghrib time. So if somebody got their period right before Maghrib and then into the next day in Maghrib, and then it stopped soon after Maghrib, cut off for an entire day, and then started off the next day, all those days would be counted. That would be counted as 3 days. So basically it's from how we calculate from midnight to midnight. So if you have 11:59 and 12:01, that'd be counted as 2 separate days. Similarly, Maghrib is the cutoff time Islamically. So if 10 minutes before Maghrib and then 10 minutes after Maghrib, those are counted as 2 separate full days. Alaikum salam. So now, in regards to the page 4 is the definition of puberty, and it talks about just the scientific process, what's happening. It's when a person is becoming an adult that they're able now to have children, for a man to fertilize, and for a woman to become fertilized. And there's some details. Of course, most people know what puberty is physically. So that's not something that I'm going to cover in detail. So then the next slide, page 5 or slide 5, is girls' physical changes, including growth spurts, body shape changes as body fat accumulates around the hips and thighs, breast development, body odor and skin breakouts, hair growth to the underarm area and in the pubic area on the legs, and menstruation begins, it says, typically around the age of 12. It can be as early as 8 years old. Before that, it's considered just like an illness if somebody is bleeding, and it's not counted as a period. Referring to the pages that are found in the description in this video, if you click, you're going to see I said, so press see more, and at the bottom of the description, you're going to find the document. So you can go on your own. If you have a computer, if you're using your phone, you're going to have a tough time if you can't you multitask multiple apps at the same time. Otherwise, then if you have a computer, it's more helpful that you can watch on your phone, or you can have both on your computer at the same time. I'll try to answer questions afterwards because I want this video to be served as like a guide to go along with the document. So I don't want many interruptions from the actual content. So emotional changes that happen with the beginning of menstruation, right? Moods. So if you're a father, you're a brother, or you're a husband, right? And you're gonna, inshallah, have kids, understand these things. A lot of men who they didn't have, sisters especially, they don't know how to deal with this, and it just overwhelms them. They don't know how to handle the emotional changes and so on. So emotional changes that come, mood swings may begin, punctuated with bouts of anger, sadness, and other emotional fluctuations. Romantic feelings, interest in the opposite gender, anxiety, or interest in men. In this case, because we're talking about women, right? I'm going to change that in the PDF. Interest in men. Anxiety and or excitement about the changes she is going through, concerns over increased responsibility, fitting in socially, and separating from her parents, etc. What does reaching purity mean spiritually? This is the important fact here. It means that a person is now considered an adult. In front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now they have the capability, enough capability, to be held accountable for their deeds. Beforehand, they must do their best, and their parents teach them and so on, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them some leeway for them to learn. Now if they go willfully, if some child is mentally developed more, and they're like, oh, I'm going to willfully go and disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before my before I reach puberty, right? This is still willful disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but so obviously that's not something anybody should do. It mentions over here, Allah places 2 angels on your shoulders, Raqib and Atid. As far as the literal nature of this, Allahu Alam, and if that occurs at that time. But when do you reach puberty? The youngest age a female can reach puberty is 8 lunar years. Now, this is something that there's a lot of confusion in regards to translations of what the age is. 9 years, in her 9th year. Often you find books saying in her 9th year, in her 9th year, in her 9th. فإذا بلغت التاسعة من العمر. التاسعة من العمر means that she's in her 9th year, which means she is how old? Please put in the comments. I'll give 5 seconds blank to see if anybody gets it. In her 9th year means that she is 8 years old. 8 years old, that means she's completed 8 years. So the reason why this becomes an issue of confusion is because when we have kids who are very young, we refer to them in months. And then once they reach 1 year old, we call them 1 years old. During that whole year, how old were they? Were they 0 years old? We just don't call it 0 years old. We calculate it in months. But they were 0 years old. So they were 0 years old for that whole year. But they were in their first year. So then once they finished that first year, they began their second year. And during the whole second year, they were 1 year old. And in their third year, they were 2 years old. Hopefully that makes sense. If a person hasn't completed that year, they're not that many years old. A child is not born 1 year old. No, they're born 0 years old. So for that whole first year, they're in their first year, yes. It doesn't mean that they're 1 year old. It means that they're 0 years old. It's actually calculated in months. Then in the second year, they are in their second year, but they're 1 year old. I mean, they completed 1 full year. So when a girl completes 8 full years, she's beginning her 9th year. She's going through her 9th year. Jazakumullah khair for giving her the link. So she's completing her 9th year, and that means that she is in her 9th year, which she has completed 8 full years. In America, we call that she's 8 years old. In Arabic, it would translate to she's in her 9th year. So if a girl is in her 9th year, that means she's 8 years old. That means she's able to reach puberty. That means if she has bleeding, then generally it's going to be considered from obviously from her female private part. Then she's considered as having her period. But if she hasn't reached 8 years old yet, and I'll just refer to it as 8 years old and not in her 9th year. The fiqh books would say in her 9th year, but that causes confusion because in America in her 9th year it automatically thinks 9 years old, but actually it means that she's 8 years old. So if she is 8 years old, lunar years, which means like 7 years old and 300 days almost. So it's basically 8 years old. Once she's 8 years old and she has bleeding, then this is considered her first period. And then we'll see what happens from there. But then now she's considered legally responsible, and she's considered Islamically an adult. She's able to make her own decisions in regard to certain things and so on. So now a female reaches purity by getting her period, and there's different signs of puberty, and there's a difference of opinion in the regard, but generally the surest sign is getting her period. Now, if she doesn't get it, the release of sexual fluids or a wet dream, or by the age of 15 lunar years, if she's in that, or it could be actually 14, this could be miscalculated. I'm correct, 14/15, because it could be based off of the wrong translation. Then she would be considered being an adult, regardless of whether she's had her period yet or not. Then she would have to start, she would be obligated to do things that an Islamic adult is obligated to do, and should be considered held accountable for her actions. So if that's the age that she has not, and this could be in regards to the Shafi'i madhab, there's other opinions that it could be 18 years old and so on. So ignore this in regards to actually specifically Maliki fiqh, but this is just in general. But generally a girl is going to know that she reached her puberty by her first period. Barakallahu fikum, Sister Shahina. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for making the Facebook and joining us, alhamdulillah, and being understanding and patient with your learning, and Allah will reward you inshallah for all of your efforts. So then this takes us to the matter at hand, types of bleeding. That's on slide 9. Number 1 is hayd, which is period bleeding or regular bleeding. It's normal period blood. Women recognize this type of blood. Different women have different colors. It should probably say over here the different colors. Maybe I'll copy that. It mentions later on what those colors are. There's also a smell to it. I know this is disgusting for a lot of guys to hear, but for women, this is a fact of life. There's a particular smell to the period blood. It's different. It's recognizable from, and women know what's considered their period blood generally, but you have to actually check if it's like if it's not one of the ones that's mentioned here, then she could have a medical problem, and she would know as well. So it's important to note what the color of the blood is, and for a woman to become familiar of what her period blood is and what isn't. So during that time, she cannot pray, enter the masjid, touch the Quran. Those things will be mentioned later as well, except if she's a teacher or a student and needs to... So she cannot... So to clarify, it doesn't mean she can enter the masjid if she's a teacher or student. That's not true. She can touch the Quran if she's a teacher or student and needs to place the Quran aside when not reading from it. I'll actually change the wording there, but she still needs to place the Quran aside. So even though she's allowed to touch the Quran if she is a student or a teacher, then she touches it as minimally as possible, as much as she needs normally. To like if she has something to place it on, that's better. So she's not holding it the whole time. She doesn't just touch it unnecessarily. Just put it down, carry it, no problem, as long as for teaching or learning. So once that regular period ends, then ghusl is obligatory. So once she sees dryness or she sees the white discharge, then for women, as I said, different women have different signs of their period ending, then she must make a ghusl, and whatever prayer is entered at the time of her not finishing her ghusl, but the time that her period ended. At whatever time the period ends, that's the time that if it's during like dhuhr time, even if there's only time for just one rak'ah of dhuhr, or sorry, if there's time for all of dhuhr and even one rak'ah of asr, then dhuhr is obligated. This takes us to a different matter that women need to know. We're going to address it inshallah later on, which is what happens if the period ends 5 minutes before or 10 minutes before Maghrib. She didn't pray Dhuhr, obviously, because she was on her period. She didn't pray Asr because she was on her period. She doesn't have time to make ghusl to pray Dhuhr and Asr. Still, Dhuhr and Asr will be required. Dhuhr and Asr are considered joint time prayers, and Maghrib and Isha are also considered joint time prayers. What that means is if the period begins during any of that joint time, neither of those prayers is obligatory. If it ends during that joint time, both of those prayers are obligatory. Okay, and we'll talk about the exact specific details that come later on. Number 2, the second type of bleeding is called istihada. I'm not sure I'm going to cover that today, but it's irregular bleeding. Irregular bleeding is not period blood, right? There is a lot of times that irregular bleeding occurs, and some women regularly have irregular bleeding. Unfortunately, here's the most major issue that a lot of women need to know. If you have irregular bleeding, you know what your period blood is, and this irregular bleeding is not your period blood. And it doesn't come out the same way or the same pattern, and it just comes out in the middle of like between periods, and it's not. So you need to learn how to distinguish your own irregular bleeding, because as far as that irregular bleeding is coming out, you still have to pray, fast, and do your other obligatory acts. And how it's dealt with depends on if it's continuous bleeding or spotting, and if it's less than a day, half the day, or more. Inshallah, we can cover that as well. So understand first, there's 3 types of bleeding. There is hayd, which is the regular blood. period blood. And then istihada is more like, it's called irregular bleeding because it's not period blood. It's more like actually regular blood than period blood, right? And it should be distinguishable to women. Then there is nifas, which is postpartum bleeding or lochia discharge. Lochia, this postpartum bleeding, this nifas. Don't learn the word lochia if you don't know it. Learn the word nifas. Nifas has a different range of time. Quite simply, once a woman gives birth, then her periods will start up again. But first, she has to go through the stage of postpartum bleeding. And the maximum length of this is 40 days. 40 days. And inshallah this will come later on the notes, but just for your information, if this 40-day maximum time, that means that if she has a period, if she has her nifas, and then the bleeding stops for 2 days, and then it starts again, and then it stops, and then it starts again. She adds up the days until they reach 40, and once they reach 40 days, then whatever is after that is not considered nifas anymore. Or she has it for like 2 weeks, and then it cuts off for 10 days, and then so how many cutoff days actually are considered cutting off the nifas or haid? It's 15 days. There have to be 15 days in between. So for a lot of women, they'll have their nifas for maybe 2 weeks, then it cuts off for 10 days, then it starts up again. They treat it as a period. They'll treat the bleeding that's after those 10 days as a period. That's in fact not correct. Now they have 2 weeks of bleeding, 14 days. So so then they have 10 days of purity, that's fine. But then they started bleeding after that. Those get appended to the first 2 weeks that she was bleeding in. And it's still considered part of nifas until she has purity for 15 days. Okay, so understand how it's considered and how those days add up. It'll make sense soon, inshallah. So then in regards to hayd, now let's go into detail. And this is the real beginning of this most important part of this class. Okay? So every woman has their first period once. Okay? And for that first period, the maximum is unknown because she has no experience from before. So she's considered, and this is on page 10 or slide 10. So she's considered, a beginner in this case. So that means the default ruling for the maximum period is 15 days. So 15 days of actual bleeding. So if she bleeds for 6 days, and then it pauses for 2 days, then it continues on for another 5 days. She'll add those 6 to those 5. She'll keep on adding days, and it'll be considered the same first period up until it reaches 15 days. 15 days is the absolute maximum time for a period. No matter whether a person has experience before or not experienced before, 15 days is the maximum time that it will Islamically be considered a period. Okay? So, period blood, the colors of it are red, pink, or a brown discharge or a yellow discharge. Okay, it can be like dark red and so on. So red, pink, brown discharge or yellow discharge. So a lot of women, when they look for their period blood, is my period ended? And they look and they see, there's some yellow discharge. Actually, note that clear discharge is not considered a period blood. And what happens, a lot of women, they do have a clear discharge or the white discharge that comes out, and then it dries up and then it looks yellow. So they say, oh, well, I'm still getting discharge. No. So yellow discharge means fresh yellow discharge. It came out as yellow. But if it's the clear discharge, the white residue that comes out, that often can mean that the period ended, not that this is discharge and you're still on your period. Okay? So if your normal discharge is yellowish, then you have to differentiate that it came out yellow, then when you're seeing, oh, my period ended, and you look and you see, oh, well, I have some yellow. Well, differentiate between the yellow that came out fresh yellow, or that it's the clear discharge that came out and dried up and now looks yellow. If it is the dried clear, that would not consider be part of your period, and in fact can indicate that your period has ended. Okay? But if it's fresh yellow discharge, you would know that your period is still ongoing. So understand the normal types of discharge, don't worry. Some women, they have red, dark red or whatever, pink, brown discharge, yellow or yellow discharge. So don't think that you're abnormal, that you have brown or yellow or whatever. Different women have different periods. And even some women have different types of periods as well. And very often it occurs due to hormonal changes and so on, or stress as well. Now, slide 11, minimum and maximum period. This is very important because a lot of women who have long periods, they're suffering, prayer becomes an issue, and they just, they're like barely getting a break from their period, and they think that another period started. And they just it's so difficult for them to know, and because of ignorance, I've seen women that have stopped praying because they're like, I don't know whether I'm bleeding, I just don't know, so I'm just gonna stop praying, and they never bother learning. So learning is essential to actually knowing when you're supposed to be praying and what prayers need to be made up and what prayers don't. First of all, it's important to mention that while a woman is on her period, not only is the prayer that the period came in on, that prayer that she doesn't have to make it up, but throughout her entire period, all the prayers that she had in the middle, during her period, she never has to make up, and it's wrong for her to make up, and it's bad, and she's not doing a good deed. Those prayers are not obligatory upon her. She's going to make her life difficult and do a bid'ah and so on. It's not right for her to make up the prayers. Those prayers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you a break. You don't pray during those times. You don't make up the prayers afterwards. Okay? As far as fasting, yes, you make up the fasting, but as far as prayers, no. So, as far as the maximum period, on slide 11, it says maximum period, if she doesn't have a habit yet, her longest period can be 15 days. Okay, and anything beyond that is istihada, is considered irregular bleeding, even if the blood still looks like period blood. Okay, if it's not her first period, which is the case with most women, right? You only get your first period once. So if it's not your first period, then what is the maximum duration of your period? It's very simple. You look at the longest period you've ever had, even if it's a one-off, irregular time that you've had a long period, and then you add 3 days to that, and that's the maximum that could be considered period in the future. So if your longest period ever was 10 days, then generally you're not going to get a 10-day period again. But if your regular period is 10 days, or your longest ever was 10 days, then now, years go by, you never got one longer than 10 days. And then once you get one, that's 11 days. And then you're like, wow, 11 days. And then it goes into 12 days. And then 13 days. That's it. After that, on the 14th day, at Maghrib time, khalas. That whatever bleeding comes out after that time, it's not considered your period, because the longest period you had before was 10 days, and then you had 10 days, and then 3 days after that Maghrib, khalas, you're considered not on your period any longer. But then after that moment, now you've had a period that was 13 days, correct? So then you wouldn't, even if the bleeding continued a couple more days, you'd still consider the longest period to be 13 days. And then now your maximum period after that would be your longest period plus 3 days. But now you have a problem. Now 13 days plus 3 is 16. So now your longest possible period is 16? No. The longest possible period is 15. Okay? Is 15. So let me add that here in the notes. Max is 15. Okay? The max is 15 days. The minimum of purity days is 15, and the maximum of period days is 15. So if if your period is regularly, hypothetically saying it's 16 days long, it'll never be counted. The 16th day will never be counted as part of the period. And I don't know of any women that have that issue, but women, they get it even sometimes like 10 days, and then they have 15 days of purity, then 10 days. Some women have it really rough. But the absolute maximum that would be considered a period is 15 days. And for other women, it's your longest period plus 3 days, and the maximum is 15 days, right? So if your longest period you've ever had was 12 days, then the longest period that could be considered a period in the future is 15 days. If your longest period was 7 days long, then the longest period you can have is 10 days. But then how about if you do get that 10-day one? Then the new maximum is 13. What if you end up getting that 13-day one? Well, then the maximum now will never go up over 15. Okay? So you need to keep track of how many days your period was, so that you know which when you get your new maximum in the future. Okay? And days of purity, there have to be a minimum of 15 days between periods. And this is what I said, that a lot of women don't know that. There must be a minimum of 15 days. It doesn't necessarily have to be purity, but it has to be 15 days that are not considered your period. So if your longest period is 5 days, and then, so that means the maximum amount for you in the future would be 5 plus 3, which is 8. So let's say you do end up getting that 8-day period, and the bleeding continues into the 9th day, and the 10th day, and the 11th day. For the 9th, 10th, and 11th, those would not be considered days of period. Those would be considered days of purity, and then once you have 15 days, doesn't matter whether there's bleeding or not, those are considered purity days. And then after that 15-day period passes by, the 15-day time of purity passes by, then you'd see if you got a new period after that, and you'd know the blood would change, or whatever sign that you know your period comes in with, that would happen. That would then be considered a new period. But if that happened in less than 15 days, that's not considered a new period. So let's say that a woman has a period for 10 days. And then the bleeding stops for 14 days. Then she has bleeding again for 10 days. Only 5 of those 10 would be counted as period, because that would be the maximum of 15 period days. After those 5 days, whatever days are after, that would be considered one period. A lot of women would consider that as 2, because they had 14 days of purity in the middle. But 14 days is not enough. It has to be 15. So whatever bleeding happens after that 14 or 13 or 12 or 11 or 10 or 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever happens, whatever bleeding happens without a 15-day gap is considered part of the same period. And the cumulative days, you keep adding them up. Once they reach 15, that's it. After that, you can pray, you can fast, you can have intercourse, whatever. Even if the blood is still coming out, you can still pray and so on. because you're not considered on your period anymore. Okay. So then number 12, it goes into the thing that I just described. So now there's some hypotheticals, there's some questions. Okay? Question, so if a girl's period is 5 days, what is her max for this month? Okay, let's see if we can answer that question without looking at the answer. If a girl's having her first period and it lasts for 5 days, then after that it ends. But still, now she's waiting for the 15 days of purity. During those 15 days, obviously she's praying and so on. But then if it starts up again, then you'd add it to those 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So what is her maximum if it's her first period? It is 15 days because she never had a period before, so this is her longest period, even if it was 1 day, right? So the next month she has another period. And the bleeding lasts for 8 days. What is her max? Her max was 8 because the last month she had it for only 5 days. So then her max after that point would be 5 plus 3, which is 8. But after that, now since she had it for 8 days long, then her max after that would be 11 because her longest period ever was 8. And then the maximum is the longest plus 3 as long as it doesn't reach more than 15 days. So she would refer to her previous month, her longest month. She bled for 5 days. Okay, so then 5 days, add 3, max for that month would be 8 days. So then the question, the third month comes and she bleeds for 9 days. What would have been the maximum? Her maximum would have been 11, but she only bled for 9. All of those days counted as period days. But then now, what is her new maximum? Because her longest period now is 9 days, so her new maximum is 12 days. Okay, that's on slide 13. Of course, the questions need to be edited just a little bit. For 14, if the blood cuts off intermittently, then she adds up the days until she completes her max duration. So the signs that the period has ended is dryness or a clear white discharge. So if it cuts off intermittently and it stops for like 2 days and then it starts up again, when it stops, you see it stopped, you see that dryness or the clear white discharge, okay, now you know that you have to make ghusl and you have to start praying. Then in 3 days it starts again. Sure, you stop praying, and then you add those days to the original days, because there wasn't a time of 15 days of purity, so that would all count towards the same period, and the maximum would be 15 days. And then once your maximum duration is reached, then khalas, whatever is after that is not considered a period. So once the blood cuts off, that you're seeing that, okay, now am I gonna have to pray or not? You see that the blood is cutting off, and you know that khalas, my normal period is 9 days long. Then the 9th day came, and you're looking and you're seeing if it ended. Okay, it ended. You only need to check once every prayer time. You're only obligated to check once every prayer time. So, for example, you know your period is normally 9 days. On the 9th day, it's dhuhr. Oh, is my period ended? Oh, nope, the blood is still going. So then you don't have to pray dhuhr, and you don't have to check again until asr. Right? In asr you check, or maybe even for dhuhr and asr. So for asr you check, oh, still bleeding, no problem. Maghrib comes, it cut off, okay, no more blood. Then you make ghusl, you pray maghrib and and then Isha would be obligatory as well. And then Asr wouldn't be obligatory in that case because you checked during Asr time and you saw that you were still bleeding. Okay, so it's only obligatory to check once to see if the spotting has cut off. The spotting that occurs towards the end of the period that signifies that khalas, it's going to be over. So if the period cuts off during Asr time, then she must pray both Dhuhr and Asr, because Dhuhr and Asr are combined times. So then what if there's only enough time to pray Asr? There's not enough time to pray Dhuhr and Asr. I'm not talking about enough time to make ghusl and pray, but there's only enough time to pray 4 rak'ahs, and a person's a resident. So then only Asr would be obligatory. If there's only enough time to pray, if her period ends close enough to Maghrib that there's enough time for 4, 3, 2, or 1 rak'ahs, then only Asr would be obligatory. But if she had time to pray 5 rak'ahs, or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, then if it's 5 or more, if you're a resident, then you have to pray Dhuhr and Asr. And you're like, oh, what? There's enough time. There's 15 minutes before Maghrib, and then my period ended. What am I gonna do? I can't make ghusl, and don't worry, go make ghusl. Asr time is going to have passed, and Dhuhr time is going to have passed, but you still need to make them up. Because your period ended, so they were obligatory upon you, even though you still didn't do your ghusl. No one's going to blame you for not making your ghusl fast enough. You didn't have time to make your ghusl and pray, but those prayers are still required to make up because the period ended during them. Same if the period came in while there was 5 rak'ahs time before Maghrib, then neither Dhuhr or Asr will be obligated for this person. If Dhuhr came in and she did the haram thing by saying, I don't care, Dhuhr came in, I'm going to wait and pray later and later and later, and then Asr comes in, and then she's doing wrong by delaying the Dhuhr that late, but now she gets her period during Asr time, because Dhuhr and Asr are combined, then the obligation of the first prayer of the Dhuhr prayer is not obligated to make up, nor is Asr. Okay? So then, as we said, when the period is ending, it's obligatory for her to check once during the prayer time to see if the spotting has cut off. How about if the period ends and it's Ramadan? Ramadan, there's another obligation, which is fasting. So then, if a woman checked at Isha time outside of Ramadan, and she saw the blood was still going, then she doesn't have to check again before Fajr. But if it is Ramadan, then she has to check again before Fajr. She gets up during Suhoor time. She sees because there's another obligation at stake. There's the obligation of fasting. During prayers, there's no obligatory prayer between Isha and Fajr. So then she just can sleep and wake up at Fajr and check. And if there's blood, she can, go back to sleep. But if the blood stopped, then she has to pray Fajr. But if it's Ramadan time, there's another obligation, which is fasting. So she needs to wake up before Fajr and see and check sometime during the night. Am I bleeding? If she's bleeding, then she doesn't need to fast. If she's not bleeding, then she needs to fast. Even if she doesn't make ghusl in time for Maghrib, for Fajr. So impermissibilities during menses. Entering the masjid is impermissible. Praying is impermissible. Right? Praying is missing for some reason. Prayer. Entering the masjid. Tawaf, which is going around the Kaaba. intercourse, and touching the Quran except for teaching and learning. So, an important note that it is permissible to recite the Quran. It is. As opposed to other madhabs, in the Maliki madhab, if a woman is on her period, it is permissible to recite the Quran even if she is not a student or a teacher. So if she just wants to recite without touching the Quran, just for recitation, then she's allowed to recite, but she cannot touch the Quran. So it is permissible for her to recite the Quran on her period, regardless if it's for teaching or learning. She can just recite it because she wants to recite it. Otherwise, but it's still not permissible for her to touch it unless she is teaching it or learning it. Okay? In regard to intercourse during menstruation, this is a very important issue. A lot of women, they just stay away from their husbands during this time, and that's it. Good luck for their husbands. It doesn't matter how you're feeling, whatever. That's not right. She's still obligated to fulfill her husband's desire in a halal way. But as Aisha radiallahu anha stated, that she would, when she was menstruating, she would wrap something between her navel and her knees while she was with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for marital relations. No intercourse would be performed from the private part, but the rest of the body is still accessible, and she's still able to do what she needs in other ways without actual coitus, actual standard sexual intercourse. So then a lot of women, they just stay away from any type of thing. No, you should wear something that covers from the navel to the knee, and then fulfill your husband's need. How about if somebody's period ended and they haven't made ghusl yet? So if the period ends and you haven't made ghusl yet, then your ruling is stricter. Then you should go and do ghusl. There's no more excuse for the recitation of the Quran or for touching the mushaf and so on, for teaching and learning. No, if your period ended, go make ghusl, and then you can do those things again. So how to calculate hayd? And inshallah I'll verify that last part in regards to the ending of the period. But in the ending of the period, then the permissibilities generally are not going to be the same, because it's different, because your period ended now, and you're clean and you're considered, but you're in a state of your time of purity has begun, but you just need to make ghusl. So you're in an impure state, although you are no longer on your period. So how to calculate hayd? With the information you need. So for women, this is the information you need to get, and you need to think about and go back to. The dates for the longest period cycle you've ever had. A lot of women, they're learning this for the first time. They didn't study this before. You need to go back and see what was the longest period you've had, so you know what is the maximum period you can have. If the longest period you've had in your life was 7 days, then your maximum period is 10 days until you have a period that's longer than 7 days. Also, you need to know your average duration for your period. Most women do know this. What you also need to know is that according to the Islamic calendar, the day begins at Maghrib and ends at Maghrib the next day. So, again, if you have your period, so if you're calculating which days you had your period on, it's Maghrib to Maghrib. So if your period started at Asr time, that counts as a full day, and then after Maghrib, that counts as a second full day, as we said. So you need to calculate. So when you're calculating your period and you're noting these things down, note down when it started, because it affects how you calculate the start date and how many days it's counted as being as. So for example, if today was Sunday, May 17th, 2020, if my period began between Fajr and Maghrib of today, then the first day of the cycle would be Sunday, May 17th. But if the period began during Isha time or during Maghrib time, the first day would be the 18th. So on your calendar, you wouldn't mark anything on the 17th, you'd mark it on the 18th. How to calculate continued. Calculate and note down the types of, and a lot of women through long experience, they'll know, but it's good to write it down as well, especially if somebody's new to this. Types of discharge outside of your period. Okay, at this time, this type of fluid came out. Doesn't match the period blood, is it different, and so on. The types of discharge outside of the period. The exact time it began, as we said. So if a period is spotty, then you must record every time it cuts off. Okay? It cuts off whether it's for a day or two or a few hours, and so on. So if your exact time your period ends, exact time your period begins and exact time it ends. The type of bleeding, heavy, medium, or light. Then you'll notice cycles and patterns with yourself that'll help you understand yourself better and the calculation better. And changes, in color changes, smell changes, clotting, watery, etc. throughout the bleeding from start to finish. Okay, note that down, because then you'll notice what is period blood and what the stages go through and so on. You'll know what to expect. You'll know if something is off. You'll know if something is wrong. You'll know what is the difference between period blood and not period blood, etc. Also, the time the period ends, in order to know which prayer is due, that's actually, that's all already mentioned. When you make ghusl, note that down. Because you need to know, okay, if I made ghusl, then you need to know what prayers you missed. Sometimes your period ends right before the next prayer time and you didn't have time to make ghusl, that prayer is still due. And during Ramadan, you need to note down exactly which days you didn't fast when you were on your period. And then in pages 19, 20, there's a calendar for people who want it, and there's some examples as well that go along to enter that information onto that calendar and to see and to check on that calendar. And then there's some information after that in regard to istihada and I believe postpartum and nifas. We covered a lot of the nifas stuff. We didn't cover the things in regard to istihada. Let's wait. Let me see if anybody has any questions. Please post your questions. Anything that's unclear. I know it can be confusing the first time you hear it, so going back, going over the document slowly while listening, then inshallah you'll eventually understand. Anything that's unclear, ask. Maybe, so this is our last class of this 3 p.m. time. After this, we are not going to have class anymore during 3 p.m. Next week, there's no class. And then the week after that, there is class. So I might make a special class anytime. Maybe it's going to be 3 p.m., maybe it's not. Next week, just about the issue of istihada and to answer questions that are left over in this class. So with that, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept, grant us istiqamah, allow us to have fulfilled and accepted prayers and fasting and to, fulfill the knowledge, to allow us to learn the rest of the knowledge that we need to learn, and to bless us to practice the knowledge that we have learned, and to keep us on the straight path until we meet Him. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.